You are already on the path of awakening. It's time to transition from a life of struggle to a life of play. It's time to discover your autonomy, agency, sovereignty, and potency. Welcome to Reveal the Game of Life. Hey everyone, welcome back to Reveal the Game of Life. This is Molly Mandelberg, your host, and I'm here with your other host,
Chris Tomaso.
Bow, 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 bow. So I was meditating this morning, and the thing that came up for me for us to maybe do a podcast episode about was biofeedback and regulation. So that's the name of our episode today, and sort of synopsizing those two things. So Chris and I were just talking about how if your nervous system is dysregulated, that's kind of like an all-consuming state of being, that it feels stressful, it feels hard, it feels activated, and that is not our most receptive state. It's not a place where we're really tapping into new ideas, where we're really perceiving new opportunities, where we're really allowing our path to unfold in that flow state that we've talked about on many episodes before. A cool thing to start practicing or noticing or becoming aware of is the process of biofeedback. And there's like lots of devices coming out there, which we're going to talk about one of them today, that will help you sort of become aware of your biofeedback or notice like the information that your body is trying to give you at any given moment, and so that you can pivot or re-regulate or change your energy state to get back to that flow or get back to that optimal or get back to that, parasympathetic versus sympathetic nervous system response. So that's the topic for today. Chris, tell me a little bit about what you think about that biofeedback topic, because I know you have some insider info on biofeedback itself.
Yeah. I love this topic because, I wanted to kind of like talk more broadly about feedback in general. Like feedback is such an amazing part of the process of like getting into flow. Like I think about like use a guitar, right? You get the sound, you play a chord on the guitar and it sounds bad or it sounds good. And that is like instant feedback. And I find that the things that get me into flow the most are those that have kind of feedback. Another one for me is video editing. Like I can say, oh, like what happens when this cut goes next to this cut? And then I just watch it immediately. And then I go, oh, that feels good. Okay. Or I could tweak it a little bit. It's those things that don't have feedback that are kind of like the hardest things to change in our lives. These are those long-term things people are always talking about, like diet and exercise. Like you start changing your diet, you don't get feedback on it like for a while. You might feel a little bit different depending on how much you're connected to your body, but you're definitely not going to have like visual feedback for like quite a long time. Same with like exercise or these things that are really, really important. And biofeedback is interesting because, like there are kinds of feedback and tracking that I think can be really valuable. Like I think of like a step tracker. That's like a feedback mechanism that a lot of people are familiar with, but I like it, but then it becomes like limiting. You know what I mean? Like you start to get obsessed with the feedback itself. You're like, I got to get my steps in today. And then you get kind of like obsessed with it. And it's like goes into this whole theory of, as a gamification consultant, we talk about extrinsic motivation versus intrinsic motivation. And so when you get obsessed with the feedback only, then you can like kind of over focus on it. And then you get demotivated because you're trying to just like hit the metrics. So this is all kind of like a long way of talking about biofeedback. There are certain kinds of feedback mechanisms that are coming into place, which require like very advanced systems that you can only get like if you go to like a special spa or something like that are starting to become in wearables, right? This is technology that is existing right now. And what I love about it is the people I worked with, there was a device, or the company's called Sensei, and I guess that's what the device is called. It's the headset, and but their approach is this is what's going to get you into these states, into flow. The goal is not the feedback. Feedback is sort of like a the purpose is to put you into that flow state, essentially, different kinds of flow states. And I think that's what's like essential is when we think about the technology, the people who create these technologies, it's like, what's their intention? Is their intention for you to use the tech forever? Is for you to get obsessed with the data? That's kind of like the world we're in. And so I'm really excited that like conscious people are creating technology that the goal is to like help us heal ourselves, essentially. That's like where it comes around to. It's like this nervous system regulation is really about like the body and the mind already know how to do this. This is just giving training wheels and help facilitating it. That's one thing I really love about this product is it's like it's not doing it to you. It's helping you do it to yourself, and it's helping you become more aware of the mechanisms in which they lead you to this regulation.
Yeah. So to go back to the step tracker thing, like the desired outcome of that technology is that you start making a habit of and enjoying parking further from the grocery store and walking,
Right.
or that you get into the habit of like taking a longer walk than you used to. And yes, then we sometimes get just hooked on the data. And I've definitely been there where it's like, oh, I'm trying to go to bed and take my watch off, but like I'm only 50 steps away from that benchmark. So I'm just going to walk around my bedroom for a while or walk up
Right.
and down the length of my van, depending on where I'm at. So yeah, it can be useful and it can be habit changing, which is like part of why it exists, because people wanted to create that feedback loop that you feel rewarded. You get a dopamine hit for getting some benchmark that starts to change your behavior in a positive way. So what I've gotten from, and Chris worked with the Sensei guys, and so I was like, oh, get me in on that. I still haven't gotten my headset yet because they've been in,
Yeah.
startup mode, getting it all ready for everyone. But the idea is like you sit there with a headset on and there's some sort of feedback of audio information or visual information on the app that's telling you where you're at brain frequency wise. And through
Right.
that audio or visual feedback loop, you can do whatever the fuck you need to do to calm yourself or to
Right.
ground yourself or to get into that deeper state of meditation so that you can see it changing and you can start to like fine tune your behavior to get into that state more easily, more naturally. And what we have talked about plenty of times on this show is when you're in that state, that optimal flow state, energetic state of like resonance or of receiving or of, calmness, peace, that more magic can occur. More can come through you, more can be perceived or become aware of, more clarity around the choices you want to make. All of that gets expanded when you get the junk out of the way. The junk being the monkey mind, being the
Right.
tasks for today, being the drama with the people. Like once you can clear that stuff and you start training yourself to like know that you are clearing that stuff for a moment at least, that becomes a muscle that you have. Just like now it's really easy for me to walk all the way from, one end of the parking lot to the grocery store, was it used to be like so annoying and frustrating and uncomfortable. Not me necessarily, but maybe somebody who was super sedentary and then suddenly got a step tracker. That we start creating this feedback loop for the purpose of a new state of being that maybe we wouldn't have had access to before. And
Yeah.
I'm glad we're doing this conversation too, because it really feeds into the game of life, that
Hmm.
this is another sort of interactive experience that you can have to optimize your life, optimize your living, and take yourself to a more regular state of thrival.
Hmm.
Yeah. So is there more to say on that, or should we switch to the regulation topic?
Um, I think the regulation topic is really important because, and I think it dovetails, right? The biofeedback is one way to meet regulation, but I think regulation is so important because I like that you're bringing this in because it's sort of like this merging of the physical and the energetic
Yeah.
like lenses. And what I have seen is when you are trying to expand your capacity to receive like things that you haven't received before, whether that's more money, whether that's a partner that loves you in a way that you have never been loved before, there is like a there is a physical process that happens that shows you that you're not ready for it, quote unquote. Like your body is not ready to handle it. And that's such a weird way to think about it. We're used to thinking of it in terms of, no, I just have to like make it happen. And of course, tomorrow, if I won the lottery, I would be fine with it. But actually, if you've ever had this experience where you quantum leaped, like all of a sudden became aware of an opportunity and started to let it in, you might have a physical response where your nervous system is actually not ready. Some people call this like the fear of success. I've had this happen before where it's like, I don't know if I can actually handle how good this can get. And that is a kind of not talked about thing because you just assume you could handle it. Because like, what like it seems weird to, and especially to talk about this, to say like, oh, like I had this opportunity to receive all this money and I just don't know if I can deal with it. Like who's going to relate to that? But it does happen. And actually not preparing yourself, your mind and your body to be in the state of receiving those kinds of things is actually a large part of what keeps them away.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think, I mean, people talk about upper limits plenty.
Right.
And I think I think it's Marianne Williamson that said
Mm-hmm.
something like people are far more afraid of their light than their
Mm-hmm.
failure or their darkness or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
that we unconsciously sometimes sabotage those experiences when they show up because of that belief of I'm not worthy or it's too good to be true or
Right.
not I'm not that person who receives such a thing or that underlying belief of you have to work hard for that to work out and I don't want to work that hard, so when it shows up easy you're like, oh no, it can't be true. Like there's so many points of view and so many implants and just judgments about this reality that come up to say, oh, this is something new and beyond what I thought was possible, let me kill it because I don't know how to handle it, or let me spend all that money that just came in so that I'm back in debt because that's a more comfortable state of being for me because it's familiar and because everyone I know is in that state and it just makes more sense to be there instead of this insane level of thriving. Yeah. So to bring it back, that our capacity to regulate our system when that kind of sabotagey behavior or when that upper limit stuff shows up is one way of collapsing uh, that barrier or that resistance and returning to a place of surrender, receiving, openness, expansion. And if we can do that, like on demand, which those biofeedback tools are
Yeah.
designed to
Right.
help us figure out how to do that on demand, then
Yeah.
what else is possible?
Right. Yeah. Going back to the feedback piece, like the feedback that you get that your nervous system is dysregulated is like, oh, I'm stressed, or I can't make decisions, or I can't focus, or I'm being triggered. I'm in this fight or flight response. Like, again, like the things I brought up earlier, it's imperfect and it happens usually way after the thing that quote created it. Right. And limit like getting the feedback closer and closer to when it happens, like the cause and effect, and being able to become aware of that. I've been DIYing it basically, and there's plenty of ways you can DIY it. Like I journal. We talked about that in the journaling episode. I try to just become aware when I'm being triggered, like what is happening. Obviously, just like breathing exercises. There's all these ways to regulate yourself, like that you can do internally, and so technology gives the ability to potentially like speed that feedback loop up to find out what are all the ways in which I can regulate myself that I may not have even been aware of. That's what's really exciting about it to
Yeah.
me is it's not changing your state temporarily, like taking caffeine to help you focus. it's learning like what is the actual mechanisms of focus internally. What are the signposts of those things that I can become more aware of as they're happening? Usually we have such imperfect feedback about ourselves. We're just kind of like going along, and then if things get too bad, then you start to think to yourself, wait, what's going on? What is this happening? But what if you add more granular feedback of any given time? And I'm saying feedback in a very broad sense,
Yeah.
because I think this context is really helpful because it's easy to rely on the technology will save us,
Mm.
right? And I just like the better technology gets, the more I have to be like, yes, stop, pause. The technology will not save you. You save yourself. You
Yeah,
might do
just
that
like
through whatever
nobody else
channel.
can save you. You have to save yourself.
Exactly. It's just externalizing your power.
Yeah.
But if you are if you take that, if you are in your sovereign self, the possibilities of where we're going with technology, like I said, with people consciously creating technology to facilitate our own spiritual development. And I, not to talk too much because it's under NDA, but the states, you talked about relaxation, the states of what this device can do are many, right? There's different frequencies that they've mapped in your brain. And one of them is like relaxation. One of them is relaxed focus. One of them is sharper focus. One of them is this gamma state of like heightened creativity. And it's not just those things, it's also um, sort of co-regulation, right? Being able to put this on yourself and then in a group. If you've ever felt synchronized in a creative group, you felt the outcome, which is like, wow, you and I are on the same page. We're creating this, we're creating something none of us have ever created before. Like being able to embrace a reality where those things happen consistently, like that's the thing that's most exciting because it happens already, but it just feels haphazard without like conscious intention and the right tools. And when I say tools, I don't necessarily mean going to a spa and getting biofeedback. I mean any tool that works for you.
Yeah, totally. So I want to talk about some tools for regulation because maybe it's me, but I feel like my social media feeds and conversations with clients and things have been bringing this up a lot lately. And so I
Yeah.
just want to talk about some of the ways that you can shift back from that you can choose to be like, okay, whoa, I'm in a state and I want to shift it right now.
Yeah.
You mentioned journaling. I would say journaling is, for me, it's preemptive and it's
Right.
in the
Yeah.
moment. Like I do my journaling practice morning and night preemptively to get me into a more calm state. And if I get triggered, my journal is like one of the solid places I can go to process and return to that better state. Not better, but more relaxed and in receiving and flow state. Because I process externally through words, and either I need to talk to somebody to help me like figure out where I'm at with the thing that happened, or I need to write it until I figure out where I'm at. So that's one that works before and during. Like you said, breath work. There is to go back to the sympathetic and parasympathetic, and I don't know all that much about this stuff, but I'm pretty sure what I've been told is that normally you can tell we're pretty shallow breathers unless we're consciously thinking about it or you have a practice with breath work. If you deepen your breath to be your full lungs, belly, like diaphragmatic breathing, and slow it down, like taking one breath every 10 seconds or more, that your parasympathetic nervous system gets turned on by that action. So if you're ever like, wow, I'm really stressed or this is crazy, literally just deepening and slowing your breath. And I use this one all the time. It changes your state at least a little bit, which sometimes can be enough to give you that agency to deal with whatever's up in front of you. Emotional freedom technique. So tapping, I think we've talked about this before at least once on this show. If not, go to Tactical Magic. I've had Amanda Ferret on that show a couple times, who is an expert in emotional freedom technique, which is tapping on meridian lines on your body, which are the same acupressure points that they use in acupuncture, but you're basically just jostling those acupressure points and it changes your emotional state. It literally deprograms the heightened, sometimes call it negative emotions in your body, can be really rapidly de-escalated by tapping on your body, and you can do it anytime. I got
Hmm.
uh I was in a very loud house with a lot of kids, and I love these kids very much, but there was such a high frequency of noise and drama in this moment that I was literally just sitting on the couch tapping myself like, I'm here, I'm good. Like, I'm not going to get caught up in this. I'm right here. I can be present and helpful and do something for me to re-regulate. And I just want to name one more before I hand it off to you. Nathan McTague, who I think you also know, a really brilliant emotional intelligence coach. Him and his partner have awesome retreats for this kind of conversation. But he's been posting these beautiful poems this last week or two about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it's literally naming things in your sensory awareness to bring you back to the here and now, because a lot of nervous system dysregulation is thinking out into the future or thinking about the past. So what just happened to me or what's gonna happen to me, that past and future thinking can, when it's in that heightened state, can be really spiraling out of control. And to bring yourself back to the here and now, it sort of forces you to recognize that in this specific moment, I am actually okay. And most of the time, that is true if you're willing to come back to this moment. Of course, there are experiences where you're not actually okay in this moment and you need to get the fuck out. But largely, our lives are spent in, if we're willing to look at this exact specific moment, everything is okay. So the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is 5 things you see. So from right here, I see my plant Phoebe. I see the front seat of my van. I see the blue curtains. I see my countertop. I see my frying pan is still out. That's 5 things I see. Then there's 4 things I feel. So I can feel my ring on my hand. I can feel my hand on my elbow. I can feel my wrist on my leg. I can feel my foot on the pillow that I keep under my desk. So that's 4 things I feel. 3 things I hear or smell. I forget. It's hear or smell. And I start listing those. 2 things I hear or smell. I forget which order those go into. And 1 thing I taste. It's like remnants of the apple I bit a little bit ago. And just by listing those things, you're suddenly here now. You're no longer in the spiral of before and after. So it's a really cool and so simple. You don't have to do it out loud. You can just be sitting there like, wow, I'm stressed, or gosh, I can't believe he said that to me. And then go, okay, what's 5 things I can see right now? And it just brings you back into your body in this moment, because you have to perceive what your body is experiencing instead of all the things that your head wants to do. So it's pretty cool.
That's really cool. I really like that. And I just want to add to that, like most stuff about regulating your nervous system is body based. And if you're a mind identified person like myself, it can be easy to try to talk yourself out of what's happening. And oftentimes when you try to do that, you're like, there are ways to do it, and I will talk about those in a second. But what often happens is you're trying to like, you're not perceiving, well, I will say what happens for me. I'm not perceiving that I am dysregulated. And so I am now engaged with a story my mind has created about what is happening or what will happen or what has happened. And I am trying to satisfy the conditions of that story with my mind. I'm like leaving my body completely out of it, right? My body could be like, yo, I'm really hungry, or, you know, all of these signals that I'm just not listening to. And instead I'm engaged in my mind, like, oh man, this event's coming up and I'm really nervous about it, blah, blah, blah. I shouldn't be nervous. No, like, it's going to be fine. Like, there's this kind of, if you've ever talked to a friend and they dismiss your feelings and they're like, just override what you say and say, no, what you really should think is this. That's oftentimes what's going on in my mind when I'm trying to engage with a story. Like, I'm basically dismissing how I actually feel. The way to get out of that is to kind of go for the underlying belief. And this takes some training. It's helpful to journal about it. Say something like, I don't need to be certain about this right now in order to get the outcome I want. I get to let this thought go. I don't have to engage with this thought in order to be safe or whatever I'm trying to do. Right. So if I need to disengage the story in the moment, that's what I do. But yes, almost anything else, that has to kind of go in tandem with some other way to calm yourself down, whether that's breath, whether it's, I mean, honestly, like channeling the energy and going for a walk or doing something where you're like synchronizing. Sometimes it can be helpful to pace the feeling that you're currently having with your physicality instead of trying to calm yourself down when you're really nervous or stressed out or keyed up. Start going for a jog and like pace with it and then slow yourself down.
Mm,
Like once your body, you just want to get your body on board with something because your body is the thing that's creating the state or that it's receiving the state, right?
yeah.
And so without doing that, like you're trying to use like 1/10 of your body, aka your head, your mind, to try to slow down this mechanism that is so much better at regulating itself when it's fully activated, when it's fully engaged.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Another one is uh to do with your body that includes your body is actually just letting your feelings be felt
Right.
without the story. So the story is, oh my God, he said that and I'm so mad. And you shift that from, okay, I'm aware there's some anger here. I'm looking at madness. Okay, let me just set the story about what happened and what I need to do about it aside and look at, okay, I'm feeling angry. Where's that anger live in me right now? And it's like, okay, I feel it in my solar plexus, feel it in my
Mm,
throat. Okay, what does it feel like? Well, it feels like constricted, it feels like tightness, and then starting to describe the sensation of that emotion as much as possible. So, like, okay, if it was like a weight on your body, how much would it weigh? And it's like, come up with a number. It'd be like 250 pounds. Okay, so if it had a color, what color would that anger be right now? And it's like a fiery red with like a smoky black around it. It's like, okay, well, if you were able to breathe into it, like how much space would it hold with that breath? And it's like as big as a bread box, as big as a car, like how much space does that emotion need right now? And just start going into how many ways can I describe my physical experience of that emotion right now as it's happening? And as you do that, it begins to feel acknowledged. You're actually fully embracing the experience of feeling that emotion. You're busy doing stuff with your mind to interact with the emotion that allows you to now detach a little bit from the story you've been latched onto. And so it does all these different ways of allowing it to be felt. And whenever you allow something to actually just be felt, it leaves, it dissipates so much faster. I think it's Warner Earhart or I forget his name exactly, but EST or landmark education that says what you resist persists. And it's when we try to say, oh no, I'm not angry. I'm not upset. It's fine. I'm great. It's okay. You can hear the lie. But that's called resistance. You're resisting, you're trying to shove it down into that little box where you've put everything else in your life that hasn't been processed yet and move on as if it's not there. And what happens is that box becomes this like pressurized container and that anger starts to like spew out in really nonsensical places and times where you don't want it to come out. So your willingness to actually feel it and move through it not only starts re-regulating your nervous system, but it also allows you to flush out that emotion so it doesn't have to come out in some awkward time and place in the future
yeah.
or create dis-ease in your body as it's being contained and resented.
Right. Exactly. And that what you're saying like sounds right, but in practice, so much of the time we hold our emotions in because we're trying to keep a like steady, at least I do this. I try to just keep a steady attitude through life. And so a lot of times I'm not aware that something's going on until it becomes big enough for me to notice.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of this is about being aware of things. And so to bring it back to feedback, imagine if you were able to become aware of things right when it was happening,
And
like
name
how,
them
and
and
name them.
have tools to utilize in those moments.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one
That's
of the
that.
hardest things I will say, I was in kind of a dramatic relationship emotionally, and the hardest thing was like, oh no, I know I'm dysregulated. And in that state, my amygdala or whatever wasn't doing
Yeah.
the thing it needs to be doing. And it's like,
Yeah.
I have a dozen tools and I can't
Right.
think of one.
Yeah.
So I had to like
Right.
make myself a cheat sheet of like, okay, here's how you go. Or like tell somebody, what were my tools again?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, because there are states of being that you don't have access to any of that. And that's kind of the whole point we're making in this, I think, episode is you want to have access. You want to have access to your tools. You want to have access to more of you. And that's a muscle that we build through awareness, sometimes through technology and tools, and through learning and practicing new things as we go along. And through that, we are more resourced. We are more capable of thriving. We have options and we have possibilities that maybe can't be so well accessed in those other states that are less productive.
Yeah. And I will say that, like, for me, any expansion is almost always in some activating experience. Usually expansion is not where I feel familiar and comfortable. It's where I get into an experience and I have to courageously show up, and I'm uncertain of what the outcome is going to be. And so automatically my nervous system's going to get activated. And so I like what you said about being proactive. I think it's really important, if this is resonating with you, to like create some kind of practice where you become proactive about it, because then it's almost like you train yourself so that when you get in the situation, you are more aware of the things you did before.
Yeah.
And so you're more likely to remember them and be able to do something to be able to navigate that. Even to the point of, I recommend, like, if visualizing connects with you, or some way, call upon the possibility of that experience into your body and then see what would happen. What would it be like if you really did get that opportunity? Talk to that person you're scared to talk to, whatever it is, and then try to like simulate that feeling in your body, or like say, like, what would it feel like? And you basically get a trial run at, like, what does my body feel about this? Our body is like our best feedback mechanism if we become attuned to it.
Yes. Yeah. And I love what you said about practicing it before. It's like really necessary. An example of that is many years ago, I was like really into dreamland and wanted to like master lucid dreaming. And one of the ways you can know you're dreaming, number one, is if you see a sign written or a time on a clock and you look away and you look back. In this reality, it'll usually say the same thing. In a dream, it will almost never say the same thing if you look away from a sign and look back. So I started doing that. It's every road sign, everything I saw, I would look away and look back and be like, okay, so that in my dream, that would already be a habit I was doing. And so I'd start doing it, and then that would be a trigger for me to notice. So you create the habit, and then when it comes time to need it, it's already there. It's accessible. So it's like doing that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or starting to do tapping like 5 minutes a day, or just like set a reminder on your phone to do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 at some random time. Then that starts to become something that you just know how to do because you're practicing it. You're in the flow of it. You're building it as part of your repertoire. And then when you need it, when it comes time to, unfortunately, maybe get nervous system triggered or activated, that's something that you can call upon a lot more simply and more easily because you've been practicing it. So cool.
Yeah.
Great ideas. Hopefully this episode was helpful for y'all. Do you have anything else to say? I think we went a little over time today.
No.
Cool.
I think these are some great tools, and it's so important. I'm so glad to see so much conversation about it happening all over the socials. People are just like, nervous system regulation so important. It's like, yeah, both just for quality of life and also to get your magic like creating on a level that you maybe don't even think is possible yet.
Yeah. And health and longevity too. Like cortisol can harm the body if there's too much of it too often. Cool. Well, I had fun with this episode. If you enjoyed it too, maybe go share it with a friend, or tag us on social media. Let us know that you're listening and you enjoyed it. We're always open for suggestions, feedback. If you've been chewing on an idea and you want us to know, let us know. revealthegameoflife@gmail.com, or revealthegameoflife.com if you want to see more episodes and more about the show. But yeah, as always, take what works for you and leave the rest. And thanks for being here. We'll catch you next time for another episode of Reveal the Game of Life.
See you later.
Bye.